The book of Samuel focuses on the creation of the monarchy and on the lives of three people: Samuel, Saul, and David. Samuel was the last judge who God used to select Israel's first two kings. The first half of 1 Samuel focuses on his story. There, we see Saul anointed as the first king of Israel. The second half of 1 Samuel tells his story, with a bit of emphasis upon young David. David was the second and greatest king of Israel, and the book of 2 Samuel tells his story. The dominant issue in 1 and 2 Samuel is the creation and the beginning of the monarchy. The material you read in 1 Samuel chapter 8 focuses on how Israel came to have a king. If you recall, there seem to be two factors that encourage Israel to have a king. First, Samuel's sons were doing a poor job. The Israelites wanted better leadership and to be like the other nations. Second, they rejected God as king and begged for a new leader, but God did not intend for Israel to be like other nations. Their request to Samuel was really a way of replacing God. Through Samuel, God made it clear to the people what they could expect from a king. Do you recall the warnings God gave them in 1 Samuel chapter 8? The king would exploit them, dominate them, and they would be his slaves and do his bidding. In 1 Samuel chapter 8, verse 17, Samuel writes that the king would take a tenth from the Israelites, the tithe set apart for God, as a way of saying he is replacing God. However, despite these warnings that you saw come to pass in your reading, the people still demanded Samuel appoint them a king. Why then, if God is opposed to the Israelites having a king, does he tell Samuel to seek out a particular person and anoint them? Is God blessing a bad decision? A decision he is opposed to? In a sense, this act demonstrates God's benevolence and love. In the midst of the Israelites' bad choice, he still seeks the best for them. If the Israelites seek a king, God still wants them to have the best king possible. Even though the Israelites opposed God, God did not oppose them. The first king of Israel was Saul. If you recall your reading from 1 Samuel chapter 9, we are not told much about why he was selected. It says he was a tall, handsome man who was a good fighter. Perhaps this was the kind of person the Israelites, not God, wanted. You also read about his early success. In 1 Samuel chapter 13, you read of his military victories over the surrounding people, something that surely pleased the Israelites. However, the early story of success is quickly followed by the decline of Saul. The book of Samuel emphasizes three key failures by Saul. First, in 1 Samuel chapter 13, Saul sins by offering up a sacrifice prior to a battle. What was so wrong with this? There are two key problems. The first problem is that the Mosaic covenant, as expressed in the book of Leviticus, made clear that only particular people in particular ways could offer up the sacrifice. This was, after all, using a limited and flawed thing to come before a great God. The second and more important problem is about why Saul offered up the sacrifice. Do you see that he was not motivated out of a desire to worship God, but as a way of rallying the people? He was using the worship of God for very selfish motives. Second, Saul sins in forcing the people to adhere to a very uncompassionate curse. In 1 Samuel chapter 14, Saul is so angry in the midst of battle that he commands his people not to eat anything for the rest of the day, or face death. Not only is this a harsh command, but when his son, Jonathan, not knowing the command of his father, ate that day, Saul sought to kill him nonetheless. Third, Saul was disobedient to God. In 1 Samuel chapter 15, Saul is commanded to conquer Amalek and to destroy everything. Saul disobeys by keeping King Agag alive as a sort of trophy, and by keeping all of the valuable items they find in battle for themselves. These three key sins led to God rejecting Saul as king. Throughout the story of Saul, we see glimpses of Israel's second king, David. The book of Samuel tells us a peculiar story about David. Yes, he acts with bravery to kill Goliath, but at the same time, he hides and fights with the Philistines. The entire time that Saul is king, David grows in power and popularity. Saul witnesses this and grows violently jealous of David, often seeking to kill him, but with no success.